What's going on, guys? I'm a regular guy at the Regular Guy Firearms channel. Thanks for watching. Okay, so I knew that the questions were going to come about the Docter on this guy before I even started to do the review on the ACOG and all that jazz. So here it is, right, as far as just a review on the Docter itself is concerned. Its adjustments are accurate. It is a clear dot. It's easy to shoot fairly far away with. It's easy to shoot pretty close with. And I'll never use it on a defensive setup in my entire life. Not the Docter, ever. First and foremost, it's far more complicated than it needs to be. Okay, and this is going to be a pretty short review because if I need to make adjustments on this thing, and we're talking about for a defensive rifle here, if it's a competition thing or a I just want to do it thing, okay, yeah, the field's all yours as far as what it is exactly that you want to put on your guns. But if we're talking about a defensive rifle thing, okay, now, in order to make the adjustments on your optic, you have to loosen these two screws, which requires a really small screwdriver, which you can't use the smallest flathead on a Gerber for. Trust me, I tried. And then you have to make adjustments up here or right here. Okay. Windage, elevation. Additionally, they're not definitive at all, and it comes with like this little wheel thing that hooks to a small individual flathead screwdriver that will tell you exactly how far you're going to go and all this other stuff. Absolutely not. That's a specialized tool that I absolutely do not need. Ever. Okay? And there is no reason that it needs to be that complicated. If you're going to smack one of these things on top of an ACOG or a similar setup, I've seen dudes do that to like LCAN Spectres and whatnot, go with a Trijicon RMR. Okay? So far, that's the most durable dot that I've seen. The adjustments for it are still accurate. You can get varying different sizes of dots, which I'm pretty sure you can do for this one too. I just used the lowest one. That's at like a 3-minute dot. But by adjustments of windage and elevation alone, and the fact that in order to loosen these up, you have to loosen up 2 screws that I am certain that over time will back out because they're very loosely fitting screws that you can very easily undo. No, I would not use that in a defensive application ever. Okay. Now, with that being said, as far as a dot on top of an ACOG is concerned, right, there are a couple of things that you have to be aware of. First and foremost is holdovers, right? If I were to just stick a regular aim point Comp M2, Comp M4, or T1 on top of this rifle with an exact co-witness, I would have about a 2.6 inch difference from my point of aim to my point of impact up close. Meaning if we're at 5 yards and I hold my sights on the center of a target, the impact is going to be about this low because height over bore. Make sense? Now, with one of these dots, and this dot is designed for a closer range application, you may have a couple of issues to deal with, okay, because this dot is supposed to cover down from about 75 yards and in, right? Okay, cool, we can get it zeroed at 50 or even 75 yards or whatever, so it can cover that space that the ACOG has issues with because it's a 4-power scope. But when we get up close, we have issues like this, okay? This is actually like take 2. I put a couple of rounds into the first dot on this target. But I'm going to go ahead and put 5 more on top of that, just so you can see at 5 yards, this is where we're at, 5 yards, what the difference is between that 2.6 inch hold and this guy right here. Okay, so at 5 yards, right, holding at the center of the dot, this is where my impact zone is. Okay? That is serious. That is a lot of holdover. Okay? Now, I'm going to tell you where it is that I hold on this guy after I get the hits on him, just so that you can tell basically the difference. Because on this particular target, it's fairly small as far as just a human size comparison and all that. But on this target, in order to hit in the center of the brain box, I'm basically holding just between the forehead area and for what the target would be the scalp, because that's the holdover for a red dot, right? For this guy, I'll let you know exactly how high I have to hold from there. Now, to get these hits, I'm right in here. Okay? That's a pretty serious kind of holdover here if we're talking about, you know, having to take a fairly precise shot up close. Now, there's going to be a lot of guys that say, oh, well, you don't need that kind of precision up close and stuff. But the problem is that I don't plan for my day to go good. Okay? I plan for my day to be the worst possible thing that I would ever have to deal with. The ubiquitous hostage scenario and all of that other stuff, yeah, that's something to be considered. But what's more likely to be considered is that, you know, within the place that you live, you have like granite countertops and whatnot. There are some legitimate things within a house that you can actually use for cover. So if my bullets are going where I want them to go, I'm happier with that, number one. And number two, if there is some kind of holdover, I would like it to be less, because I would like to just have a dot floating in less air and space over somebody in order to get that hit. Because the difference between that and a regular red dot is that on a regular red dot, if I'm trying to hit someone in the ocular cavity, I'm still up in about here. Okay, right at about the forehead-ish area, and I'm hitting them square in the nose. So high on the head, and that's a good reference point. With this guy, I'm at the edge of the scalp, depending on, you know, either how close the dude is or how big his friggin' dome piece is. I could be floating in space over the dude's head, okay? And if I'm going for a hard shot, which is way more likely, let's be real, I'm floating up in this area here. Does that make sense? So your reference points start to get more airy on whether or not you can hit well, because of the fact that you just have to make greater adjustment than you did before. Now, with that being said, can you get the job done? And yeah, there's a whole bunch of shots in the heart box area of this target. So I'm just going to go for the A box on this target. Now, can you get it done fairly fast with not that much of a holdover, or just snapping into position and shooting square on the target? For sure. You know, you can train yourself into figuring out this hold pretty well. And again, we're at 5 yards at an actual CQB distance, and it's not that big of a deal to get those hits. Okay? And by the way, I have no idea. I guess I just felt good for this, but that's generally I shoot like that if I'm shooting a little bit faster, okay? But, you know, it's going to be slightly different for who is willing to tolerate that. For me, honestly, if I trained with it, I could get used to it and it's okay. A lot of people don't like the chin weld thing. I don't think that that between here and here is that much of a big deal up close. To me, it really isn't that big of a deal. Mostly because, you know, I am also messing with a brick, and I do still train at night and stuff. So in order to use a brick right anyway, I'm still pressing a button and holding my head over the freaking sight systems anyway. So I'm kind of used to having to do this, you know. And for me, it's a tolerable thing. I can deal with it, but you know, it may not be the same for you. A lot of other guys would just say, you know, get a canted set or a canted mount on the gun and then stick your dot on it and call it good. You know, there's a bunch of different variations for this. A lot of guys are not going to like this, but for me, it's tolerable. You just have to understand that you will be training harder to deal with it. Make sense? So, in conclusion, really, you're going to have to figure out on your own whether or not you can tolerate a dot on top of your rifle. And as far as defensive purposes, get an RMR. A Docter is just not it. It's more complicated than it needs to be. And I don't see it as a survivable option, especially for zero, mainly because loosening these two screws is how you make your adjustments. I'm not cool with that at all. I can see someone chasing their zero for days on this particular optic. But, that's me. And if it's not for a defensive purpose, then it doesn't matter, all criticisms are off because you can use it for whatever at that point. You know what I mean? But those are my thoughts. If you have any questions or if you have any thoughts on this particular topic, yeah, go ahead and throw them in the comments box below. For me, ultimately, my thought process on a dot on top of an ACOG or a Spectre is, but that's really it. But with all that being said, remember, guys, a regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Be easy.